All right, let's give it a few minutes for everybody to get in here. Awesome. Okay. All right, let's get people in the chat room here. What's up, guys? Andrew's in the house. Jago's always here. To the Moon Collectibles. What's up, guys? We got Geoff. He's in the waiting room, but I just wanted to give like about 30 seconds or so to get people in the chat here. We're going to jump straight into questions. I know you guys have a lot of questions. I will try to highlight your questions if I can. I've got like 4 main topics, which I'm going to discuss with Geoff. But if I can, I will pepper in your questions to it. What's up, Casey? Let's see. Derek's in the house. Global Sports Card Investor. Highlighting all you guys here. My man, Charles. What's up? All right. Merlin's in the house. All right, guys. Let me just get my pen real quick. All right. Are we ready? Are you guys ready? Let's bring them in. Geoff, how are you?
Daniel, what's up, man?
Yes. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I appreciate it. Yes, everything's good. Super excited about this interview. I'm a little bit nervous, so please bear with me if I stumble on my questions, but we got a lot of people entering the chat right now, so I think a lot of people are excited to see this.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see everybody and excited to see you. We bumped into each other at a couple of card shows now.
Right.
And I've always been attracted to what you have because you always have some incredible uncut sheets and other wild things at your booth every time I go by.
Right. Yeah, I'm very eclectic collector, and I have to admit, like, I'm super excited about this because, like, when I got back into the hobby, like last year, obviously your content was one of the first things that I was consuming, and that got me up to speed because things had changed so much for me since the last time I had collected. So, I really appreciate all the things that you do. And for me to be able to meet you at certain different shows, I was always like, oh, that's Sports Card Investors. So, and at that time I was just starting to build up my content. And for me to kind of get to the point where I actually have you live on my channel, this is like super cool for me. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Well, your channel's been doing great. And for everyone who just popped in from our Sports Card Investor Discord or Facebook group or that type of thing, please subscribe to Daniel's channel. You've been on a tear. You're getting close to 5,000 subscribers now. I think you were just celebrating your 3,000 subscriber a few months ago.
Right. Yeah, I really kind of slipped on a banana peel with this one. I don't know like what happened, but people have seemed to be very the feedback has been very positive on the content that I've been putting out there. So it's been super cool. And that's like motivating me to continue to put out content on a daily basis to try to grow the channel and kind of see where it goes. So very excited about that.
And by the way, you have a fantastic intro. You have a fabulous intro. I think the whole show is made because of the intro. That's my guess.
So let's just address the elephant in the room here. There's not one week that goes by that I don't get a comment from somebody that is bashing me, saying that I had ripped off your intro. And I tell everybody, it's not the same. You're on a journey to profit. I'm just trying to break even. It's completely different. It's not the same. So, obviously I want to get your thoughts on this. Have you watched it? And do you think that I had ripped you off, or do you see it more of it like an homage?
Well, first of all, I think anyone who was in the hobby in 2021 from about March through December was also on a mission to break even. I mean, that you were doing all right if you were breaking even the last 9 months of last year. I was not breaking even on every one of my card purchases. Although, thankfully, over the last couple of years, I did a lot of dollar cost averaging, which is
he's watching, guys. He's watching.
You talked in your last video, and you're dead on. That's a very important video for people to watch and understand. It's very important that people understand what dollar cost averaging is, and especially with how the sports card market's been over the last year, where you had, a crazy peak followed by a pretty massive dip. if you put all your chips in at the wrong moment, it could have been bad, right? If you put all your chips in right at the height. But if you were buying a bit every single month over the course of many months, then you overall have done really well. So it's your approach there makes a big difference. And so I thought your last video on dollar cost averaging was very important. But to get back to your original question about your intro, I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a great homage. Yes. The first time I heard it, I laughed out loud at the the bit about, during the day I invest in sports cards and at night I make videos about investing in sports cards. I thought it was perfect. And then I do it to break even at the end. That's pretty solid as well. So good work on the intro. I do appreciate it.
Great. And if you don't mind, I mean, I'd like to cue it up and play it for those people who haven't seen it. Maybe they're new to my channel, but just kind of show it off a little bit here, just so people know, get a little context. Do you mind?
Let's do it. Here you go.
My name is Daniel Wynn, and by day I invest in sports cards, but by night I make videos about investing in sports cards. I am the great curator. Join me on my journey to break even in the hobby that we all love.
And there it is, guys.
Well done, sir.
So now,
and by the way, the photography, the picture with the tiger, the fur coat, you in the chair, it's exceptional. It really adds to the curation, the great curator image here.
That's all real, guys. None of that is Photoshop. That's just my life. But now you guys have heard it straight from sports card investor himself. We have buried the hatchet. There's no more beef between these guys. He's given me his blessing. Okay, so I don't want to hear any more comments about my intro.
All right. No, so definite thumbs up. Definite thumbs up. You're good there. We got a good crowd tonight. Look at this, by the way. We've got 130 plus people live right now. This is good.
Yeah, this is awesome. I think we're definitely going to get some traction tonight, especially with the topics that we're going to discuss here. I've been watching your other interviews with the other content creators. I know you're making kind of like you're making a tour of all the content creators out there. So I want to make sure that I'm not going to be asking you any of the same questions here. And I think that when you were talking about the role of my last video about dollar cost averaging and the role of educating people, I think that's very important. And that's a perfect segue into my first topic of discussion tonight, which is what role do you see for content creators in their role to kind of grow the hobby? Because I think that, a lot of people will probably agree with this, is that we're in a time where we consume media in very short form, like in Instagram videos, in TikTok, Reels, 10-minute videos on YouTube. That's really like where people get most of their education, most of their entertainment content now. So there's so many content creators in our hobby right now. Everybody's got a camera at all the card shows. Everybody's making vlogs. Everybody's making educational videos and opinion videos. And you are arguably the leader in this field. You've got the biggest following. So where do you see the role of content creators in terms of helping grow the hobby maybe in the next couple years?
I think it's extremely important because it allows people to experience the hobby. It allows people to touch and feel the hobby and not be intimidated by the hobby. The content that we do at Sports Card Investor, which is by far gotten the most traction, is the card show type content. And I think the reason why it is for a couple things. First of all, people want to see what these card shows are like. They don't have the opportunity to attend all of them, but they want to see what it's like. It may be people who have never been to a card show before. It may be people who are just curious about the hobby, or it may be people that love card shows and they just want to see what another one is like. But then they also want to see what goes on at a card show. Walking into a card show for the first time, if you're trying to buy cards or sell cards or trade cards, it can be intimidating. It can be the idea of, oh my gosh, I have to negotiate, and what's the right price, and how much do I know what to pay, and how's this all going to work? Like that, it can be an intimidating thing. And I remember when I was a kid going to card shows and feeling intimidated by the dealers, and they were all nice, but just the very process of understanding how I would approach a deal and why it was just intimidating. So we try to demystify that for people. We try to show me in action, and I'm pricing cards out, and I'm talking to dealers, and I'm explaining why I'm interested in a particular card, and I'm then negotiating with the dealer, and I'm buying a card. And people love to see that, Hey, sometimes I get these deals wrong. If you go back and watch all my videos over the course of last year, I've had some massive wins, and I've had some big losses as well. And that's part of it. But if you go and you do enough of these deals, hopefully you come out on top more often than not. But I think just showing people that experience, demystifying cards for people is a big thing. Cards are complicated. We have a complicated hobby with, endless numbers of sets. And then within each of those sets, endless numbers of variations, print runs that are unclear and that are, jumping all around from year to year. And there's just someone new coming in. There's so much to know and learn. So I think the content creators play a very important role in trying to make everyone more at ease with the hobby and what they're approaching.
Excellent. And, a follow-up question to that, and I agree with all that completely. I think that you touched on the point that, we're almost like the first thing. The content that we put out on YouTube is like the first thing that people who are just getting into the hobby, getting back into the hobby, that's what the first thing that they consume. And a lot of people kind of use these things as like a way to get educated and up to speed on the hobby. Like myself, when I first got back in, I was watching your videos. So with that, the follow-up question would be, as more content creators are out there and as they're putting in more content on YouTube, it seems like there's probably 30 to 50 channels out there right now. Do you feel that content creators maybe have a sense of responsibility of the information that they put out there? Because some people will put out information about what cards to buy. Some people will put out information of strategy. Some people will put out opinion pieces about other people. Do you think that they're between the content creator community, there should be maybe a standard or a code that we should probably start to follow, knowing that people might rely on our information and not know any better? And then, do you see yourself as arguably the leader in the content field here, maybe taking on a leadership role to set those standards?
Yeah, these are great questions, right? And they're interesting questions to grapple with as the hobby continues to grow. I think taking an educational approach is really, really important. I think it's okay to talk about what cards you're buying, but I think it's much more important to talk about why you're buying those cards and why you're making the decisions that you are. I think it's okay to talk about, what you think prices might do or that type of thing, but I think it's much more important to talk about why you think prices are going to do that. And I think it's important to share information. At Sports Card Investor, we've gone away from giving picks for individual cards. And we did that for a long time. Throughout the year, when I first started my membership program back in 2000, we had 2 membership levels. This is back in February, or sorry, not 2020, getting my years mixed up. February 2020, we had 2 membership levels. We had a higher level membership that included market movers, and we had a lower member level where you got card picks and you got access to like a private Discord and that kind of stuff. We ran with those 2 levels through about October of 2020, and what we saw was happening was that as flipping and more people were coming into the hobby that were not necessarily collectors or people who necessarily even cared that much about cards, but they were there to try to make a dollar. We noticed that when we would put out a card pick, that you would have a group of people who would just rush out and go buy that card. They would not read or pay attention to the reasoning as to why we were explaining it and why they just would go buy it blindly, which is always a bad idea. If you're ever any form of investing that you ever do in life, whether it's, stocks or real estates or cryptocurrency or NFTs or cards, it doesn't matter. If you're just running out and buying something because somebody else is telling you to, and you don't fully understand what you're buying, that's never a great strategy. We saw a lot of that happening within our audience. This was also during a time when actually a lot of our picks were going great because the market was just going up and up and up. So you kind of couldn't get it wrong in many ways. And we thankfully were picking a lot of really good cards. But we decided to kill that membership level in October of 2020 because of the fact that we said, you know what, we've got to focus more on education, because there are a lot of new people getting into this, and we want to focus more on education. And we continued for many months to do a buy, sell, hold show on our YouTube. But we killed that last year as well, because we once again said, you know what, we're going to replace that with more educational content. I don't think there's anything wrong with people talking about what cards they're buying and what cards they're selling. And people like to watch card pick content, just like they like to watch, gamblers talk about their gambling picks. It's the same thing. You can turn on ESPN and you can watch the Daily Wager, and they're all talking about different bets they're making. But I think the important responsibility is to really, first of all, explain why, so people can get educated as to why you're thinking that. And then second of all, to also acknowledge that you're not always right, and to talk about your mistakes, because everybody makes mistakes, and there is nobody that is perfect and that gets it all right and can perfectly predict the market. You said in your last video that it's almost impossible to time any market, and that's true. And whether you're talking about cards, or whether you're talking about crypto, or whether you're talking about real estate or NFTs or stocks, timing a market, you can have hunches, you can have guesses, you can think it's hot or cold, but you never really can time it, because it's a market, and the very nature of a market is that it's going to be volatile, and there's a lot of things that come into play as to why it's moving up or down that go way beyond just whether this player is going to do good, next month or not in the games that they're playing, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think educating, being honest about that, being forthright about that, and we've tried to layer more and more of that into our content over time. I would encourage all content creators to do the same.
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate that, and I agree with everything 100%. One of the reasons that I started to make content on my own was when I got back in the game, everything was great, right? Everybody was making money every week. And then February, March last year hit, and then we started to see the correction, which turned into, a crash, right? And a lot of people in my community, a lot of my friends were panic selling, and they were having a lot of difficulties, in the hobby. So that's why I started to make my content to basically tell people, hey, here's some strategies that I use. Here's some education, because a lot of people had not experienced anything like that before, but I have in other fields like stocks and real estate and things like that. So I was able to transfer that information over and put that content out there. So I'm a big believer in education and letting people, learn about the hobby, because I think people, when they jump in, they think it's maybe easy money. It's quick. But I always tell people this hobby, it's the most fun you'll ever have. You can make money, and it's the most fun way to make money, but it is not the easiest way to make money at all. There's definitely other categories, other markets out there where you can easily make money. So cards is not like that. And the more education that we put out there, I think that will just help people from getting burned and having bad experiences, which will ultimately help grow the hobby, in my opinion. So I definitely agree with that. And I love that series that you have, that whole educational series, because those are like really long form videos, like 30 minutes to an hour, you just giving great foundational information.
We put a lot of time and effort into that series. Yeah. It's called Sports Card Investor 101. We just completed. We had actually done some 101 type videos a couple of years ago, but we hadn't updated them in a really long time. And of course, the hobby has changed so much that some of the information, is a little outdated 2 years later. So we decided late last year to really put emphasis on rebooting that entire series. And we created, I think, a total 11 or 12 of these Sports Card Investor 101 videos, exploring every sport in depth in terms of how to approach investing in cards, basketball, football, soccer, hockey, et cetera, on down the line, baseball, of course, as well. And we, did video on grading. We did a video on how to negotiate for deals on eBay, as well as several others. And so that's all on our YouTube. We put a lot of effort into them. We added a lot of graphics to them. We tried to make them really easy for people to follow, and cover a lot of information in about a 30-minute or so time period. It all started with one called Sports Card Investing 101, which was a little longer because we really try to kind of cover the gamut. If anyone out there has a friend who's coming into the hobby, someone who you're trying to get into the hobby, and they're kind of new, and you're trying to teach them the ropes a little bit, have them go to the Sports Card Investor YouTube and watch our Sports Card Investing 101 video, the new one that we just put out a few months ago. because I think it's a really good comprehensive overview. We spent a lot of time on it and really try to make it a nice educational piece for everybody.
Excellent. And those videos are on YouTube. They're public. They're all free, right?
They're 100% free. Yeah, we don't charge for any of that content. All free.
Awesome. Okay, and then the last follow-up question I have with the content related topic here is, do you think that the big companies like Fanatics, right? Fanatics and, I don't know, PSA and Golden and those companies, right? Do you think that they will start to acknowledge content creators' role in helping grow the hobby and maybe start trying to do partnerships with them? Or do you think that they're going to focus on like the traditional forms of advertising, like commercials and celebrity partnerships and things like that to help grow the hobby in the coming years?
I think they want to do that. There's some interesting stuff going on right now. Like I noticed that PWCC was starting to produce their own content series where they were highlighting certain collectors and that type of thing. I think they've got a couple of episodes out now. Whatnot's been doing some interesting things where they've been, pulling different content creators onto Whatnot to do shows on there and that type of thing. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that this year. I mean, honestly, we've been in conversations with a handful of those marketplaces and auction houses and those types of companies about doing content with them. But what we have always stressed, and I think this is important as well, is that we want to produce content that is really, really interesting to the audience, that adds value to the audience, that also can add value to the sponsor. But we don't want to just do a sponsored show, an advertorial, that kind of thing. And we've done that occasionally in the past. But we want to try to have every single piece of content that we put out be engaging, be informative, be entertaining, be educational, be something that people really enjoy consuming and hopefully they learn something from. And so when we're talking to those types of companies, the Goldens and the PWCCs and eBays, that's the approach we take. Like, how can we work together? We appreciate your sponsorship and your sponsorship dollars are very helpful to allow us to produce this. But how can we create content that people are actually going to latch onto, that they're going to like, and they're going to get some value from? A great example of where I think we did that really well was with our virtual holiday that we did back in December. It was a 3-night live streaming event on our Sports Card Investor YouTube, 3 hours a night. eBay sponsored it. They liked the idea. They really wanted to be part of a big show like that. And we used that opportunity to try to bring on a lot of different dealers, breakers, content creators. We were doing free giveaways throughout the show. We brought on a lot of different kind of personalities in the hobby, like Darren Rovell and Josh Luber, Nat Turner, Steve Aoki. They all joined us live to do, to have conversation and everything like that. So it was an event that really, I think, served a great purpose for the audience. And it was also something that the sponsor appreciated as well, because it served good purpose for them. So hopefully we can do a lot more of that kind of stuff this year.
Excellent. Okay. As I gear up for my next question, let me just highlight this one because one of the supporters, Leo Solis, he made a donation to the channel. So we appreciate that. Thank you, Leo. He's got this question here that we can answer quickly. What tips and strategies will you give a first timer going to the National in New Jersey? He's going with his brother-in-law. So what tips can you give him as a first timer?
And first of all, Daniel, look at this, $5. Look at this. Right. You got people tipping you for questions here. I like this.
That's how we keep the channel going, guys. We need it. So please help out.
Let's see if we can get some more questions here. Give apparently $5 get you up here. We'll answer whatever question you want answered. Yes. Let's do this. So the National is an incredible experience. Anyone who gets to go to the National, you're in for a treat. It is huge, right? And one of the first things you observe right when you walk in the show floor is the sheer magnitude of it. It's an event where if you really want to spend some time at a lot of different booths and take in the whole show, it's really a multi-day affair. You can go for a day and get a good sense of it and walk around and see a lot of stuff, but you're definitely not going to be able to see everything. And you'll definitely miss booths, and you'll definitely not get to experience the whole show. If you can go for multiple days, I think that's a great thing. There's also cool things that are happening in the evenings. There was a really fun trade night that happened last year that was put on by Card Collector 2 and Kentucky Roadshow, Jimmy's Kentucky Roadshow. And we co-sponsored it as well. And that was a fun event. They had so many people show up for the trade night that they reached capacity, fire marshal capacity, like 15 minutes before it even started. So the line was out the door. I think they had well over 1,000. I think they had maybe close to 2,000 people there, and they couldn't handle any more people. People were out in the lobby of the hotel. People were everywhere trading because they couldn't even get into the official trade night. But it still turned out to be such an incredible event. Just so much energy and so many positive people in the room trying to do deals and everything like that. So it's an experience. Take it all in. Wear comfortable shoes, very comfortable shoes, and bring cash, because cash is king. Those things are important.
Yeah, definitely. The National is one of the best experience for us, our community. It's like the Super Bowl, guys. So if you get a chance, gear up and try to work your way up to that. You can attend the National. I went last year, and it was just a great experience. And we'll definitely make more content about that leading up to help people prepare for that. Okay, so then my next question I have for you here, and this is something I talk about on my channel all the time. I'm always trying to educate people and having debates with people about this, is how to properly value cards. Now, to give you some context for people here, I would say the standard of practice right now is to value a card by looking up comps on eBay, whatever the last sold was, right? And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, if the card is rare or not. But that's basically how people value cards. And I think that we used to do that when most of the activity was on that eBay platform back, let's just say like back in 2020, right? Before there were so many alternative marketplaces, before people could do transactions, offline. So that style worked great at that time. But now things have changed a lot over the year. We have card shows, we have transactions happening on different platforms like Alt, PWCC, Heritage, Golden, things like that. So do you think that maybe we need to, and you have your own apps that track all this data. I'm not sure if they track all the different marketplace platforms or if they're centralized on eBay or not. So maybe you can give us some context there. But do you think that is still the best standard of practice in terms of valuing cards now, or should we kind of evolve to use that as maybe just kind of like a starting point and leave it up to negotiations or a frame of reference? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's certainly a great frame of reference, right? Because you've got to be able to look at data, and you've got to be able to look at trends to understand what the market's doing. And the best way to track that is with transactions that are happening online, because that's where the data is actually available. Obviously, if we had a record of every single sale that was happening at every single card show across the country, and we could somehow capture that into a database, that would be lovely. And that would show a much clearer picture. But it's impossible to gather all that information accurately and know that you're getting that information accurately. So there's a couple of ways to do it. You could do it like how Beckett Price Guide used to do it, and still does it, where they reach out to dealers and they try to get a sense of what different cards are selling for, what they've sold for at card shows, and then they kind of assess all that information and put together pricing. I just don't think that's scalable today with the volume of cards that are being produced. Right now, there's so many cards that are being made every single year across all the sets and all the variations that trying to take that type of analog approach is not very scalable. So I think you have to take a digital approach. And I think the digital approach is one where you try to gather as many data sources as you can. Now, right now, our sports card investor app and market movers at this moment are entirely focused on eBay data, because eBay data had been by far the biggest, best, most complete source of data. The world has changed a bit in recent months as we saw PWCC break off and as we've seen Golden gain popularity. So we are actually real close to launching, having all of Golden's data in our app, having all of My Slabs data in our app. We're going to have PWCC data in the near term as well. So we're expanding into these other areas of gathering data as well, because I do think it's important to look at the different marketplaces and to be able to bring them all together. And the way that we're setting it up in Market Movers, for example, is where you'll be able to see all of those sales aggregated onto one graph. Or if you want to look at what, Golden's doing versus My Slabs versus eBay, you can segment them out into different lines and kind of look at them differently from that standpoint.
To follow up with that question, what do you think people's approach should be for when they can't find a direct comp, or even a light comp? Because one thing that I run into a lot is when I sell rare cards, which is what I try to focus on and collecting, people are almost like paralyzed by the fact that they can't find a direct comp for that, and they don't know if they're paying a fair price or not. And I always tell people, I say that the seller determines the price, but the buyer determines the value, and it's up to negotiation between that. Do you kind of stay away from like super rare cards that you can't comp yourself, or do you kind of use your own judgment and determine what would be fair market value for something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a way you can comp every card, but it's going to be an educated guess, right? So what I tell people, like if you're looking at a 1-of-1 card, for example, or some sort of super rare parallel that hasn't sold in, a year or something like that, or maybe has never sold, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first look for equivalent cards of equivalent players. So if there's a Steph Curry super rare card that's up for sale and I really like it, and there's no sales history on the Steph Curry card, I'm going to say, well, has there ever been a sale of this card from Kevin Durant? Has there ever been a sale of this card from LeBron James? Let me go look at them. And then I can start to compare, well, what do LeBron James' other cards sell for versus Steph Curry's other cards, and start to gauge an understanding of like, well, LeBron James cards, and I'm just making up numbers here, but LeBron James cards are, often go for 1.5 times or 2 times a Steph Curry card. So perhaps if the LeBron sold for this, then the Curry is worth, this, percentage discount on that, right? Another thing you can do is you can, even if you can't find another equivalent card, you could look at other sets where maybe, what is a 1-of-1, gone in another set, and compare that back down to a more common card, and then switch over to the set you're now looking at and say, well, there's sales of a more common card. What multiplier might I put on that to get to a 1-of-1? So you can at least make educated guesses by using market data of other card sales. And so that's often what I'll do. I think that there's a huge movement that's taken place in the sports card hobby over the last year away from base cards and away from more common variations, even, as you guys have seen, silver, prism silver, and that kind of stuff. And people have moved to these more rare, low pop, low print run parallels, all that kind of stuff. I think that is, I have 2 different thoughts on that. One is that movement makes sense because we're getting into an era of high populations, high print runs, all that type of thing. And so people are weary that there's not enough demand. There won't be enough demand over time for all these base cards, maybe even the silvers. There may not be enough demand for them, et cetera. So it makes sense that people are moving in that direction. On the other hand, there is a disadvantage to going with low population cards. And the disadvantage is really what we just talked about, that they are more challenging to price. And as a result of that, they're not always as liquid. And you don't always know what you're going to get when you try to go sell it. If you really needed to sell out of a card, like if you needed to get a particular card out of your hands, you needed to get some cash, you needed to put it out in an auction. If it's a real low pop card, that's a little off the beaten path. You may have very little idea of what that card's going to actually garner. Whereas the higher population cards, there's at least much more of an established trend line. So people are always comfortable with those cards paying within a few percentage points of the most recent sale. Because if they can look and say, well, that sold a week ago and 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago for this, and this, then I'm comfortable paying this, right? Whereas if it's a low pop card that hasn't sold in months, you're rolling the dice a little bit. Now, you can also sometimes end up with a much higher multiplier that way. Sometimes those low pop cards, if you find the right buyer, to them, it could be almost priceless. And that's when you see the prices of some of these cards just skyrocketed. And we've seen that recently with Marvel. I've seen this. We've got some Marvel comments here we're going to talk about. It's happened a lot with Marvel recently. But it takes the right buyer. to be willing to pay that type of price. So there's pros and cons to high pop cards and low pop cards. But I think both can be good if mixed in properly. Low pop generally, for the longer term investment, but you do have to worry about, the lack of liquidity and lack of sales history sometimes potentially affecting your ability to resell it.
Right. And, just to follow up on that comment, to speak to that point, I think part of all the content that's being produced out there, especially by you and your channel, I think people are just getting smarter. They're getting smarter about the hobby, about what cards they want to go after. And you went on, you gave a really good answer on, I think the Luca Tiger podcast, where you kind of talked about people passing cards around. And this is something that I've seen it for a while that I think is causing a lot of problems, where I'll see people at shows basically constantly trading the same card and passing it around until somebody gets stuck holding it, like the flipper mentality, right? You buy a card for like 80% of whatever it's sold for on eBay. You flip it to somebody at like 90%, so they got a little bit of room, and you keep doing that over and over until eventually somebody gets left holding a bag. Can you do you remember when you kind of gave that answer? Can you kind of speak to that kind of mentality? Because I think that people are learning that strategy is not working anymore, and they're kind of shifting away to what you just talked about.
Yeah, well, I mean, when the market is going up overall, at a fast pace, like it was throughout all of 2020 and early 2021 for the most part, it's easy to flip, because it's like by the time you get the card, and then a week later it's worth a little more, and the week later it's worth a little more, and so you can flip easily. When the market's going down, like we saw for much of 2021, especially the second half of the year, it's really difficult to flip certain types of cards, right? So you've got to then look for opportunities. You got to be a little more strategic about what you look for and what might hold value in the long run. There's a lot of people that say, well, the sports card market crashed last year and everybody lost their shirt. Anyone who was buying cards back in February or March lost their shirt on cards. And I say to them, not if you were buying kabooms back in February and March. That's not true. You could have been buying kabooms in February at the top of the market, and those cards are worth a heck of a lot more, come the end of the year than they were back in February. Yes, a lot of cards went down. 90% of cards went down. And of course, a lot of the cards that many people were holding, like base cards and, Prism Silvers and that kind of stuff, a lot of those cards really got beat up. But a lot of cards at the high end of the market did not. And there was a lot of cards at the high end of the market that went up over the course of last year, didn't go down over the course of last year. So, it's just a matter of being able to buy the unique cards that people are always going to want. I mean, it's kind of like buying real estate on the water in Florida. Like that's always a limited supply. There's no way to make more real estate on the water in Florida. So if you can buy something that is the card equivalent to real estate on the water in Florida, you probably have a nice, something nice that people are going to want over time. And that doesn't mean that it's, may dip and go back up and whatever. But if you buy a Prism base card, you're buying a card in a really large manufactured subdivision where all of the homes were pre-manufactured, and there's several plots of land around it where the developer can just pre-manufacture 20,000 more homes. So it might, the uniqueness of your thing isn't so great when you go to sell it. But if you have that waterfront lot, that's highly desirable, and they can't make anymore, then that thing's going to hold value in the long run.
Yeah, guys, you have to constantly learn. This hobby is changing almost like on a weekly basis. So you have to constantly learn, educate yourself, and be ready to pivot to different areas if you need to. Otherwise, if you're doing the same thing that you did a year ago, it's probably not going to work. So I think that's a takeaway from that conversation.
And I will also say though, this will bear out over time. But the hobby does also seem to be a bit cyclical. So don't assume that base cards are trash forever, and don't assume that Prism Silvers are trash forever and that kind of thing either. Because we do, there was a period of time when iconic cards were absolutely red hot, and then they really softened. There were times when modern cards were red hot and they've softened. And so it's you get people all running in this one direction of like, oh, that's the hot new thing now. Everyone's been running in the low population direction the last several months. And I get it, because once again, it's that really rare, valuable real estate in a lot of cases. But that there may be a time when things start to shift back a little bit. I'm not recommending, by no means am I recommending that people go out and buy hordes of base cards, but I am just simply saying, there's a place for them in the hobby. There is a place for base cards in the hobby. There's a place for Prism Silver. There's a place for some of the higher population cards in the hobby, and they won't always, necessarily be looked down upon as they've been the last several months.
Right. That's a good point. And one thing I think about, like what's happening is that maybe people are getting a little bit of fatigue in some of these certain categories, like basketball, for example, or base cards and things like that. And I wanted to get your opinion about this. So I was just at the recent Houston TriStar show a couple weeks ago, and I was walking the floor, and I saw some guy had these historical documents, autographed historical documents. He had two things that pop out to my mind. Was he had a letter signed by George Washington when he was General George Washington, for like a military discharge letter from like 1783 or something like that. And he had that in a BGS slab, and that was amazing. And then he also, some other guy had this picture of Martin Luther King giving a speech to hundreds of people, one of his famous speeches, right? And that was in a PSA slab. And I looked at these things, and they were like so amazing to me. Like I could feel the historical weight of these documents coming at me, right? And I thought to myself, wow, this is so cool. And I wanted to get that. And I kind of thought to myself, like, how come I never wanted to collect historical documents before? And I asked the guy, where'd you get this? And he told me one of the stories is the George Washington letter, right? He said he bought it at like an estate sale. And at the time they had it in a top loader, and he simply put it into a BGS slab. And I thought to myself, that's it. The reason I care about this thing is because it's in a BGS slab. If it was in a top loader or in a framed picture, I probably would not care about it so much. But the fact that it's in something that I can understand, which is the slab itself, it's authenticated, that makes it desirable to me. So my question for you is, what do you think it's going to take for the mainstream public to basically recognize cards and slab cards, authenticated cards, as a legitimate form of collectible? Because right now I think that and to put the subject matter of that collectible in the front. And what I mean by that is, like, if most people, they look at a card, let's just say it's a card of LeBron James, and you're the biggest fan of LeBron James in the world, but maybe you're not a card collector, you may not acknowledge it as a legit collectible, right? Because it's a card, it's in the form of a card, and the subject matter is secondary. But when do you think that cards will become mainstream, where people view that the same way they view like I'm wearing, Lakers gear, I want to support the Lakers, so I'll buy a sweater, or people who have a poster, or people who collect, comic books or stuff like that, where they'll see a card as a collectible based on the subject matter and not the form itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly think Fanatics is going to help. I think Fanatics is good. That's the thing I'm most excited about with Fanatics. I know some people are excited about Fanatics. Some people are nervous about Fanatics. I'm personally very excited about Fanatics, because I think Fanatics is going to help bring in a wider audience into the hobby. I think it's going to help the guy who you just described, the guy who's the Lakers fan, who likes LeBron James, who owns a pair of LeBron James shoes, who owns a LeBron James jersey, but has never bought a sports card in his life. That is the guy Fanatics wants to bring into the hobby. That is, and the fact that they paid as much money as they did to set up this company. I mean, Josh Luber, I think it was in Basketball Card Fanatic magazine, he recently said that he's expecting the hobby to grow. I believe it said to $120 billion. To put it in context, like, the hobby overall right now is, and no one knows the exact number, it's been debated, but I've seen ranges from like 5 to like 12 to 15 billion dollars in total output, somewhere in that range, like 5 billion to 10 billion, maybe 12 billion. Like, every company in the hobby combined is worth that. And Josh Luber thinks it's going to be worth 120 billion. And Fanatics is betting on it being worth 120 billion at some point in time. That's massive. And so they've got to get that LeBron guy. They've got to get the person with the jersey and the shoes into cards if they're going to be successful at reaching a valuation like that. So they're the best people to do it. I'm excited about it. I think that 10 years from now, you're going to see that LeBron guy with a LeBron James card.
What do you think is going to take that to happen? Do you think that like maybe some well-known people need to come out of the card collecting closet and say that they're card collectors? Because for me, like I also collect like toys, right? Collectible toys and things like that. And for a long time, it was very taboo to collect action figures and things like that. But now it's like almost mainstream, and it just took like basically celebrities to say, hey, this is a cool thing to collect, and then they put it on their shelf, and then people see that as acceptable behavior for adults and things like that. Do you think that we need to have somebody kind of break out and say, hey, it's cool to collect cards? Or what is Fanatics going to do to kind of reach that mainstream public, do you think?
Yeah, we're getting some great, we get some great comments, by the way. We're going to address these comments here in just a minute. But yes, I think that certainly would help celebrities, athletes themselves. I mean, there's such the stir, the little, the Instagram video that Giannis put out like a year ago, where he was showing that he was kind of keeping some of his own cards and everything like that. I mean, what if you could actually have Giannis in a card commercial? What if you could actually show that Giannis has a, display on his wall of all of his cards, right? Like that would start, people would see that. If the mainstream NBA fans saw that, they would probably start paying a lot more attention to, what's going on in the card world. I think, and I also think more people experiencing it. I mean, honestly, card shows need to get a serious kick in the butt in terms of the event nature of a card show. Like I've been to a lot of these card shows now, and these organizers work hard and they do a lot of job. Hey, I'll tell you this right now. And there's probably not going to be a popular statement with certain people who are involved in the organization of the National. We love the people at the National. They're good to us. We're getting, a big booth there, but I'll tell you what, I went to Gen Con this year, which is one of the big events in like the trading card game and gaming space more so. It was just such a more progressive convention. They had a much better show floor with carpet and lighting and more activity. It didn't feel like you were in a dark, dungy basement. The National feels like you're in a dark, dungy basement.
Yeah.
Gen Con felt like you were in a bright, welcoming hall. There was stuff happening. It was colorful. It was fun. There was music. There was musicians playing. They set up right across the entrance from it. They set up a whole food court or food truck park. They had stages with bands. They had beer tents. It was a scene. They had interactive things for people to do. They had displays. They had exhibits outside the show floor. You were going to an event. The National is none of that. The National needs to become all of that. And if the National can't become all of that, then other conferences need to come along and they need to become all of that. That's what the sports card hobby needs. We need our card shows to not be like you're going to grandpa's basement and, and like looking through boxes of cards with, a bunch of bald, overweight, middle-aged men. And hey, I'm going bald and a little overweight. I'm in that, but there needs to be cool people at these. I want to see 20-something kids walking around with sneakers. I want to see culture. I want to see different types of people there, different races, people from different walks of life. I want to hear music playing. I want to see energy. I want to see interactivity. I want to be able to go grab a drink on the show floor with, and interact. And I want there to be trading everywhere. I want it to be energy and excitement. And that's what these card shows need to become. And if they can become that, then that can really start to transform the hobby and bring more people in. Because right now, a lot of them aren't that inviting. There's some that are trying to be more progressive, Culture Collision in Atlanta, which is happening the week after next, will be there. It's trying to be more progressive. The Mint Collective in Vegas, which is going to be at the end of February, or at the end of March, rather, I'll be there. That's trying to be more progressive. I think you're going to be there too, right? I saw you.
Yes.
I saw you. You're confirmed as a dealer there.
Yes,
That's
I'll be at the Culture Collision also.
Oh, awesome. Perfect.
Yes.
Great. So those shows I think are going to be a little more progressive, but we got to get more of that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's going to really help the hobby.
Yeah, I definitely think the production value needs to be stepped up at some of these larger shows, because that's what happened with comics. I don't know if you've ever been to San Diego Comic-Con, but it is a spectacle in itself, and that is what really propelled the comic toy community into like the mainstream. So definitely totally agree with that. While I gear up for my next question, do you want to answer this question real quick about Tupac?
Northeast Ohio earlier, I saw he put in the chat that there are Marvel cards and Market Movers. Yes, there are Marvel cards now in Market Movers. And not only are there Marvel cards, but we are in the process of gearing up to literally add thousands of Marvel cards. So any Marvel card you could possibly want is all going to be in Market Movers here within the next few weeks. And a bunch of them already are. So that absolutely 100%, you know. And someone commented also on this in the chat. I pulled, this is crazy to think about because Marvel cards have absolutely exploded. Yeah, by the way, during this time period when the hobby was dying in 2021 and it was crashing, do you see what Marvel cards did?
Yeah.
Did you see what UFC cards did?
Yes.
You know, so
yes.
the hobby, that, you know, certain parts of the hobby were, but like there's a lot of other parts of the hobby that did quite well. So in December 2020, we did a charity box break on our YouTube channel, 100% for charity, where we were opening up, it was 25 days of Christmas, and we were opening up a box every single day. We paid for them all. We bought them all. And we said, this is a way to give back. And, you know, so our daily budget for boxes was $500. I told my team, spend $500 a day. This will be our charity donation for the year. Spend $500 a day, go buy 25 boxes, $500 a box. And we're going to open all of them. And we're going to take the best card out of every single one of these boxes. We're going to put it up on eBay immediately. And we're going to auction it off. And 100% of the proceeds will go to charity. eBay, through eBay's charity thing, right? So one of the boxes that my team found was the 2013 Fleer Retro, you know, Metal Universe, or Fleer Marvel.
Yeah.
And it was they found this box for like $300, and I honestly, I didn't know much about Marvel cards. I wasn't even that huge of a Marvel fan. I was tuned into sports cards, not Marvel cards. I didn't even know what I was opening. I opened the box. I pulled out a Wolverine blue PMG, number to 50. Yeah. Sold it on eBay December of 2020. Perfect condition. Like, pulled this thing in. The video's still on my YouTube. Pull it out, perfect condition. Have no idea what I'm actually holding. Like, you know, because back then it wasn't that exciting. It was a good card, but it wasn't that. Sold it on eBay for it sold for I think around $400 on eBay, and the $400 went to charity. And awesome. I don't know what that's worth today. You might know better than me. It's in Market Movers, so someone could go look it up. But it's worth a heck of a lot more than $400. A perfectly conditioned,
probably
PNG.
several $1,000s at this point. You know, with that, the follow-up question to that is, I mean, it seems like sports cards is kind of evolving. People are looking for different categories, different markets to get into while they're undervalued, and then see them spike just like Marvel. Do you think that's what are your thoughts on that in terms of people shifting their focus from the four major sports to alternative sports such as UFC, F1, wrestling, entertainment, things like that?
I think you need to separate between short-term fad, because a lot of flippers are doing it, and long-term sustainable, because it's actually like a growing segment in the hobby, right? Like if you go back over the last couple of years, there were moments when golf cards got red hot. There were moments when tennis cards got red hot, you know? People were looking for these alternative types of cards because people were kind of all trying to predict what's the next big thing. So they were jumping into these different areas. Some of it didn't sustain. Some of it did. I mean, you know, with tennis cards, actually, and with golf cards, the very best of the best, Tiger Woods cards have done really well over the last 2 years. Serena Williams cards just recently set records, right? So some of those net pro, like Nadal's cards, have been doing really well. You know, he just obviously set the Grand Slam title championship, or the number, you know, set the record for the most championships, right? So the cream of the cream, the GOATs from these other things are doing well. F1 has obviously been red hot. Will it sustain? Maybe. I imagine Lewis Hamilton's always going to be a safe bet because he's the guy, right? That's the guy everybody wants. Will the other drivers who people are prospecting on, these younger up and coming drivers, will that sustain? It depends on how relevant F1 remains in the card community. Some will say, well, F1's the biggest sport in the world, or the second biggest sport in the world behind soccer. So, you know, it should be very relevant for a long time to come. That may be true. I don't know. I've been buying soccer cards for a couple of years now under that same premise, which is soccer's the biggest sport in the world. And as card collecting becomes more global, in addition to the popularity of soccer rising in the US, soccer cards, in my opinion, are a good long-term bet. You know, but soccer cards have also gone down a lot in the last year, right? So, you know, there were a lot of people making that bet, and it not enough people actually buying the cards from a collector standpoint. So at what point do we hit a critical mass of international collectors where soccer cards, you know, can sustainably rise for the long term? I don't totally know. So what I do know is that baseball cards have had a over 100-year history of having value and retaining value and growing value in the long run. And basketball and football cards have had a shorter history, but they still had a history. You know, they've still had a 30, 40-year history of having value and growing in value and, you know, retaining value. And so, you know, I don't know about F1 that's had a 6-month history, or even soccer cards, which globally have been out for a very long time, but in the US have really only become a phenomenon in the last few years, right? And I certainly don't know about some other alternative sports or that type of thing. Marvel's interesting. It's obviously a massive media brand. There's a lot of people that like to collect it. So you've seen that go. Can the heat sustain around Marvel? I don't know, maybe. But if you compare it to Pokemon, you know, Pokemon, which is another obviously massive media brand. I mean, obviously that thing dwarfs, you know, not only Marvel cards, but Pokemon dwarfs the entire sports card landscape. I'm amazed by. I am amazed by. That's a good question. I'm going to answer that one in a second. I'm amazed by the fact that, you know, you referenced, you know, Sports Card Investor being one of the biggest YouTubers in the sports card world. Well, that's true. We've got close to 150,000 subscribers. Go look at the Pokemon content creators. They make us look like you know, teeny weeny. Like there's Pokemon guys that have, you know, over
like
a
Leon
million.
Hart. Leon Hart has over 1 million.
Got over a million.
For sure. Yeah.
It's got over 1 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it's like, but what that does is that also makes me very optimistic about the future of sports cards. I actually tell this to my team often. I say, hey guys, look at the waves we've made and the progress we've made and the impact we've made. And we are less than 1/10 of what Pokemon creators out there are doing. To me, that bodes really well about our growth potential, about the future of sports cards and how this could grow if things continue to go well.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. So we are approaching about 1 hour, and I do want to be respectful of your time here. We did have a couple people that made some donations channel. So if you don't mind, I'd like to try to do like a rapid fire question for you. There's 3 questions, and then I want to close it out with your thoughts on entrepreneurship within the hobby. Will that work for you?
Let's go.
Okay, so let you answer this question here. I'm not sure what he's talking about.
It's great. This is great. Yes, this is Jordan. So we do every month for our Market Movers members, we do a special private live stream where we do a free box break just for our Market Movers members, and we play a sports card trivia game to get into the box break. And for a little while, my head of sports card data at Sports Card Investor, Teapot, Tyler Nethercott, he runs Market Movers for us. He oversees all of our data. He was unbeatable at sports card trivia, like unbeatable. Like he had several months in a row where nobody could beat him at sports card trivia. And what's interesting is Jordan who had this friendly competition with Teapot, kept getting closer and kept inching up kind of against Teapot in the standings because we'll have 100 people play live. Well, then one day Teapot slipped up, Jordan beat him. And ever since then, Teapot has never been able to get back to the top of the standings again. Jordan is often above him. Now, granted, Teapot still does great at this game. Teapot, I mean, there's 100 people that play. Teapot always comes in, like on his bad days, he comes in like 6th, you know, but you know, you got guys like Jordan now. We got a couple of regulars who are always in there, who are always causing trouble. So I don't know. I don't know how we're going to get his mojo back, Jordan. I feel like he needs like a pep talk. Maybe we need to give him a little bit of study time before trivia. He feel like he needs a little momentum.
So if I can just draw an analogy, so Teapot was like the Kobayashi of trivia night, and Jordan became the Joey Chestnut and knocked him off and just closed that gap between them.
That's what happened. Teapot's Kobayashi.
Yes.
He used to destroy the contest. Then Chestnut comes along, and now he's not the same guy anymore.
All right, excellent.
I hope Teapot doesn't see this. I hope Teapot doesn't see this, or maybe he'll see this and come to the next trivia, the next Market Movers trivia.
That's the motivation he needs.
That's right.
Okay, Adam Griffin has a question for you here.
Do I see the market moving towards vintage sports cards? Well, I mean, the market has already moved towards vintage sports cards, right? Like, I mean, if you look at, I did a video on the Sports Card Investor channel about 2 or 3 weeks ago, comparing. The title of the video was, I think, Are Vintage Cards Your Best Investment? And so I compared the last year of vintage cards to modern cards to ultra modern cards. So I looked at basically vintage. The official definition of vintage is cards that were made before 1980. So basically 1979 and prior. That's the official definition of vintage. Modern is considered 1980 through, I think, like 2016. That's technically considered the modern era. And then ultra modern is the last 5 years. So I compared cards from each of those 3 eras and what have they done over the course of the last 12 months by sport. And in every single sport, the vintage cards have outperformed the modern cards, and the modern cards outperformed the ultra modern cards over the course of the last year. Probably not a surprise to anybody who pays attention in the market and, you know, is watching this. So that has already been happening. The question is that going to continue? Or are we going to see some type of reversal? Are we going to see modern cards pick back up interest again and vintage cards cool down a little bit? And the answer is, in the short term, I don't know, because the market's cyclical, and it wouldn't shock me if you saw modern cards begin to gain a little bit of momentum again. In the long term, I agree that the vintage cards, because of the lower population counts, because of the fact that there were so few printed, are going to hold value. There's one stipulation, though. I don't know how many people care about this, but this is a personal thing that I do care about. I have trouble getting excited about cards of players who were not relevant in my lifetime. And I'm not sure that many other people feel that way, but I feel that way. I don't own many vintage cards, and I'm never going to own many vintage cards. And the reason why, I know Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain, and you know, we're at Pistol Pete. I hear stories about these guys. I don't see many highlights of them because there wasn't a lot of video of NBA back then. I hear stories about how great they were, but I never saw them play. They were never, you know, around when I was around. I vividly remember Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley and Hakeem Olajuwon, that whole era. I watched that. So those are the guys, like my vintage is going to be those guys, right? It's not going to be the basketball players from the 60s or 70s or before. And same with baseball. Like, honestly, the Mickey Mantle rookie card doesn't do it for me. And I know it does it for a lot of people. Like, I know, like, that's like one of the grail GOAT cards in the hobby. I get it. But it doesn't do it for me. I'm more excited about a Jeter rookie. I'm more excited about an A-Rod rookie. I'm more excited about a Ken Griffey Jr. rookie. So that's the one thing about vintage cards. Is there the possibility that over time people will lose interest in some of the players who they never saw? And maybe not, because today people still chase Babe Ruth and Honus Wagner, and nobody saw them. So, you know, I don't know.
Yeah,
What
I
do you think,
definitely
Jake?
agree with that. I think that, vintage is all, I've always done well with vintage myself. And unless you're a historian of that sport, maybe it's not going to appeal to you. But I think that what people tend to forget sometimes is that the the reason we all do this, the reason we all collect is because there's fun. It's fun for us, and we love to collect the people that we watch or that we have some type of emotional attachment to somehow, because that elicits that response from us. So sometimes people forget about that. Like, you can definitely do very well collecting vintage, but just like you said, Geoff, if you never watch those players, if you don't care about the history, you're not going to appreciate that, and it's just not going to do it for you. So always just tell people, just collect what you love, and you're going to have fun doing it.
Yeah. And
Okay.
a lot of people in
Yes.
the chat are saying, that they love the history. I mean,
Yeah.
one guy says, I saw Bill Clinton and didn't see George Washington, but he'd much rather have George Washington's
Yeah.
signature. Okay,
Right.
fair. I get it. Gotcha. That's
To each
that's
his
a
own.
fair
To each
point.
his own.
To each
Okay.
his own.
Okay.
Yep. Fair.
Dexflow has this question for you here. I think a lot of people always ask, like, why does gold outsell everything else?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if it's just the color gold. I actually this is a personal thing because I have a black gold prism Zion that I pulled, not one that I bought, but one that I actually pulled from a pack with my son. Prism draft picks, not Prism. Prism would be more exciting, but Prism draft picks. But the black gold Prism number to 5 is less valuable than the gold number to 10. I think it's just something about the fact that it's gold, the 10, and the fact that it's numbered to 10. A little bit of a numerology thing there, I think, just makes it more desirable. I don't know, man. The hobby's weird on that kind of stuff. Like, why is the Hyper Prism, which is a super, super short print variation, very hard to come by, hobby box exclusive, or at least it was for a while. Why is that like not that much more valuable than variations that you can pull relatively easily out of retail? Like, it doesn't always quite make 100% sense.
I always tell people the hobby doesn't make sense. People just love gold because some other person says gold is the best, so that's why they collect it. But again, it's just each your own, each your own, and just collect what you love.
Yeah, for sure. Collect
Okay.
what you love, collect what appeals
Yes.
to you.
Yes. Any thoughts on NASCAR cards?
Yeah, what's interesting, so you want to talk about athletes who collect. There are some NASCAR drivers who collect. I had Ty Dillon. I noted, so Ty Dillon and his brother Austin Dillon won the Daytona 500 about three or 4 years ago, I think, 2018. And the two of them are collectors, and they collect NASCAR cards, and they collect cards of other sports as well. So there you go. There's your athlete who also spends a lot of time collecting, right? And so I had Ty Dillon. I did an Instagram live with Ty Dillon a few weeks ago, a real cool dude. And he invited me to Talladega. And we're going to go, I think we're going to get our sports card investor. This is going to be real cool. We don't have all the clearances for this yet, but what we're going to try to do is get our sports card investor team into the pits at Talladega. And we're going to try to do a box break with Ty and Austin Dillon before they go out and race Talladega. We're going to try to break some NASCAR boxes in the pits. So that's going to be a pretty fun episode that's going to come to the Sports Card Investor channel if we can pull that off. And that race is in late April. So hopefully we'll be able to get that done. I don't know, like, NASCAR, like they were great guys and I like them. NASCAR as a sport, I don't feel gets as much traction, maybe as it should. It doesn't, I felt like maybe it got more traction 10 years ago, or at least maybe I heard about it more. So, but there's a lot of interesting things happening in the sport. I mean, they just did that really cool race at the USC Coliseum, the LA Coliseum, which I thought was really neat. So hopefully they can continue to build fan interest up and we can see NASCAR cards rise in popularity. Right now, they don't seem to be very popular.
Yeah, I think if Will Ferrell ever makes Talladega Nights 2, you'll see a huge boom in NASCAR cards for sure.
Yes, agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay, last question, and then we'll close it up with your final comments here. Marvel Guy says he's asking, what's your favorite Marvel character?
So I have a bad confession that probably a lot of the audience is gonna be like, what's wrong with Geoff? So I watch other than live sports. I watch very, very little TV, and I almost never watch movies. And the reason why is honestly, I work a lot. I've got several different business ventures. Sports Card Investor is one of several. And when I'm not working, I'm spending time with my wife and kids, and I try to spend a lot of time with them as well. We do a lot of things together and everything like that. So the time that I give up in order to do that is I give up movies and I give up TV for the most part. So other than sports, right? So I don't know the whole litany of Marvel. I'm learning more of the litany of Marvel, but I haven't seen that many Marvel movies. I've only seen a handful. I did enjoy Deadpool. That was pretty cool. That was one of the few that I've seen over the last few years. So we'll go there, I guess. He was a very, very entertaining, twisted but very entertaining character.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to this, guys. When you're creating content and you're a business owner and you've got a family, the only thing that you can cut out is either sleep or TV. You just don't have time to do anything else. So definitely, I can definitely relate to that. And I think that's the last question we have. But so I'll close it out with this final question for myself here. I get comments all the time for people who watch the content, who watch the vlogs and all the things that we do. And they say, Daniel, how can I do what you do? How can I go to card shows? How can I pay for the expenses? How can I buy this card, trade it, do these things? And what they're really asking is, how can they be an entrepreneur within the hobby so that they can, experience the things that we do and have it pay for those experiences? And a lot of people don't really understand this. They think that they don't have that entrepreneurial mindset where they see it as a business that, has to sustain itself and things like that. So for you, you're a serial entrepreneur, your whole life here. What kind of advice can you give to people who are just starting out, who want to get into the hobby, who want to be able to have the hobby basically pay for itself, sustain itself somehow? What kind of general advice would you give to somebody getting started?
That's a great question. So I think it's really important to understand that if you're going to do something as a business, and you're really going to try to treat it as a business and not just treat it as a side hobby or a little side hustle, that's a lot different than, buying and selling cards and trying to make a few bucks here and there and doing it for fun and maybe doing a little bit of it for investing, right? When you treat something as a business, you've got to take a different mentality, and your mentality has to be really around, how do I create sustainable sources of revenue? If you, and Daniel, you set up as a dealer, far more often than I do. I don't do that very often. So, the inner workings of, selling cards at shows and everything, more than I do. But from what I've seen, the dealer mentality is a lot different than the collector mentality or the mentality of people who are dabbling, in that if you're buying and selling cards for a living, you're looking to move things quickly. You're looking for cash flow. You're looking to buy opportunities where you can maybe buy a lot of cards and get an overall, deal on it, where you're buying out someone's big supply at a discount, 30% under eBay, 40% under eBay, and you're willing to do the hard work to then go and sell all of those cards, sell them on eBay, flip them. You don't want to hold them, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to bet on whether the market's going to go up or down. You want to be unaffected by that. You want to instead build cash flow and be turning things as quickly as you possibly can. It takes a lot of work, because the way you can't just go buy a card from this guy for, 80% of eBay and sell it over here for 85% of eBay or 90% of eBay. That's not going to be enough. You've got to find a way to grind and to get bigger dollar profit margins on things. That often involves buying entire collections and then breaking them down. That often involves buying entire sets and breaking them down. That often involves buying piles of raw cards and then sending them off for grading and then selling them. It involves that type of work to really get things going. So if you're going to treat something like a business, it's work. And when you treat something like a business and when you do the work, it can lose some of the fun, and it can lose some of the nostalgia, and it could lose some of the, maybe what keeps you happy and connected with it right now. So be weary of that. I in a previous life, I opened up 3 Ben and Jerry's ice cream stores. And this was many years ago in Gainesville, Florida. And I was a huge fan of the Ben and Jerry's brand. I loved ice cream. I loved the Ben and Jerry's brand. I was super excited to open up these Ben and Jerry's ice cream stores. I flew up to Vermont to do their, to do the factory and to train up in Vermont. I actually ended up on the franchise advisor group and this whole, I was up in Vermont, 10 times. I was really excited going into it. And when the stores opened, I was like, oh my God, look, I've got my own Ben and Jerry's stores. How fun is this? The stores were really cool, fun environments. And then the work set in. And then you realize that running an ice cream store sucks because, your dip case is always breaking down. Your staff is not super reliable because they're all part-time college students with their own agendas. Nobody wants to work Friday and Saturday nights. And those are the absolute busiest time of your ice cream store, when the cash register doesn't balance right at the end of the night because some cash unfortunately went missing, whether it was, just someone giving someone change incorrectly or someone skimming off of it or whatever. You're getting that phone call, and that phone call is coming in around 1:30 in the morning because that's when all that stuff's being done. And whenever there's problems, those problems are always Friday and Saturday nights when you have to tell your wife, who you're, just wrapping up a nice evening out with, hey, I'm sorry, I got to go by the store. Someone didn't show up for their shift, or that kind of stuff, right? So then you begin to realize, oh, wait a minute, it's not that fun to run it as a business. So you got to be a little bit careful about that. That's one of the first things I would say. But if you're willing to make the commitment, you got to grind it out. You got to hustle. And you've also got to think about, how do you sell products or services to the people who are on their collector journey or who are on their investor journey, right? If you're in the business, you are no longer on your own collector journey. You're now servicing the other people who are on their collector journeys. And, from our perspective at Sports Card Investor, we did that by building market movers because, our premise was, well, these people who are going on this journey of collecting and investing, they're going to want to understand what their collections are worth. They're going to want to understand comps. We can build a really great tool to help them with that. We created the Sports Card Investor app, once again, oriented around people who are going on their collector journey. We create all this content on our channel, once again, oriented at people who are going on that journey. So you got to figure out, how are you going to serve people on that journey and do it in a way that's going to return profit to you.
Yeah, that's all great advice. And my takeaways from hearing that, guys, just to try to translate that, is basically, a lot of people will romanticize the hobby as being this great thing until they actually get into it and turn it into business and they see the other side of it. So just understand that there's always going to be another side to what you see. Also, when he talks about the grind, you have to be consistent with your activity, and you have to go through those bad times and work your way out of it to come out on the other side with more experience and able to adjust to make it more positive for yourself. And finally, the last thing he was saying is that you have to know your market. You have to understand the market so that you can service them and bring them value, whether that's getting cards that you can buy, sell, to trade, whether that's making a product or something like that. Understand your market, or as they sometimes say, make an avatar of the person that you're trying to get your business from. And if you can do those things, you will do well. And one thing I'll add to that too is that I think a lot of people, they think that sometimes being an entrepreneur or being your own boss or starting a business is fun, right? They see all the fun stuff about it, all the benefits that you can get from it. But really, what I tell people when I try to give advice for people starting a business is that you have to learn to love the process. The process is what will make you successful. If you can learn to love the process, then you don't mind working late hours. You don't mind grinding. You don't mind making a little bit of money in the beginning because you're in love with the process. And then eventually all that hard work will pay off. So the great answer, Geoff. And with that, I appreciate you spending a little bit extra time on this. We'll just go ahead and wrap it up right now. I have one thing I want to show you. I understand that you're a Gators fan, right?
Big Gators fan.
And I would,
got,
maybe.
Got Tim Tebow here on my desk.
Oh, okay.
Got Kyle Trask here on my desk. Yes, big Gator fan.
Okay. I'm not a huge college football guy, but I would put my money on Tim Tebow being one of the greatest collegiate players of all time, winning the Heisman Trophy, being a finalist, winning the national championship. He didn't do too much in the pros, but as far as college goes, he's probably one of the greatest, and he's probably up there at one of the top Gators of all time. I mean, they had a lot of great people like Emmitt Smith
100%.
and things like that.
The greatest, Daniel.
Oh, the greatest. Okay, so I was right about that.
What do you mean you didn't do much in the pros? He led the most epic series of comebacks for Denver that had then won their playoff. Oh, he did so much in the pros.
I will say he had the greatest 7-game run of all time in history. So with that, I have a gift for you, which I hope to give you either at one of the next 3 big shows that I see. Either it's going to be Culture Collision, Dallas, or the Mint Collective. I think you're going to a couple of those. So hopefully I can connect with you there. And I'm going to give you this Tim Tebow autograph card, 1 of 20. It's number 1. Wow. It's the alpha in the series. Who makes this? Is this flawless? Signature Prime. So whoever makes this, but that's
really nice. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So this will be my gift to you for gracing us with your time on the show here. And with that, one thing I'll ask is maybe the next time I see you, I make these funny reels on Instagram. So maybe if you're game, maybe you can do a reel with me. I've got the perfect one for you. It involves Shark Tank's theme. I know you're a big Shark Tank fan, so maybe we can do that if we have time.
Let's do it. Let's do that for sure. Yes. And thank you so much for the Tebow. I have a collection of Tebow. It's probably my biggest PC. Is Tim Tebow cards. Perfect. I don't have that one. So that's going to be a nice addition to the Tim Tebow PC. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay. All right, guys. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, Geoff, so much for your time. Let me just go ahead and end this, and then we'll say goodbye in the lobby. But for you guys who watch this, thank you guys so much. Please, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the Sports Card Investor channel. Subscribe to my channel. Give us a like. We appreciate all that stuff, guys. Thank you so much.